They say money can't buy class, but in the halls of Crimson Academy, it bought everything else. Just ask Alexander Wellington III, who made an art form out of reminding the scholarship students of their place. But fate has a wicked sense of humor. And karma? She takes notes. 10 years later, a corner office tells a different story. One where the pressed suits and practiced smiles can't hide the trembling hands of a fallen prince. The Crimson Academy stood proudly against the morning sun, its brick walls and ivory columns casting long shadows across the perfectly manicured lawn. For most students, the sight inspired awe and pride. For Sarah Chen, it only brought dread. Sarah adjusted her worn backpack, the fraying strap barely holding together after 3 years of daily use. Her mother had promised to buy her a new one once she got her next paycheck, but Sarah knew better than to remind her. The electricity bill was due soon, and that always took priority. At 16, Sarah wasn't supposed to understand such adult concerns. Her classmates certainly didn't. They carried designer bags, drove luxury cars, and complained about their parents not getting them the latest iPhone model. But Sarah had grown up watching her single mother work 3 jobs just to afford the rent in a modest apartment within the prestigious school district. The scholarship that allowed Sarah to attend Crimson Academy was both a blessing and a curse. While it offered her educational opportunities beyond her wildest dreams, it also made her an obvious target. No one embodied this cruel dynamic more than Alexander Wellington III. Alex, as he preferred to be called, though Sarah privately thought of him as Wellington the Terrible, was the unofficial prince of Crimson Academy. His family had donated the school's state-of-the-art gymnasium, and his father sat on the board of trustees. With perfectly styled brown hair, expensive clothes, and a smile that charmed teachers and students alike, Alex wielded his popularity like a weapon. Well, well, if it isn't Salvation Army's Sarah, his voice carried across the courtyard as Sarah tried to hurry past his usual morning spot. Did you find that sweater in a dumpster, or did your mom steal it from the shelter where she works? Sarah's cheeks burned as several of Alex's friends snickered. Her sweater, a simple gray pullover from a discount store, suddenly felt like it was made of sandpaper. She clutched her books tighter to her chest and walked faster. "Hey, I'm talking to you!" Alex called out, jogging to catch up with her. "You know, my family's having a charity gala next weekend. Maybe we could auction off your sob story. Poor little Asian girl, raised by a single mom, dreams of being just like us. We could probably get enough to buy you a proper wardrobe." Sarah stopped walking. Something inside her, a dam built from years of similar comments, began to crack. She turned slowly, meeting Alex's smug gaze. "At least my mother works for what she has," she said quietly, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "What do you do, Alex, besides living off your family's name?" The courtyard fell silent. Alex's confident smile faltered for a moment before twisting into something uglier. "Careful, Chen. Your scholarship can disappear as quickly as your dad did." The low blow hit its mark. Sarah's vision blurred with tears she refused to shed. Without another word, she turned and practically ran to her first class, Advanced Placement Economics, where she threw herself into her studies, the one area where Alex couldn't touch her. What Alex didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Sarah had a plan. Every insult, every cruel joke, every reminder of her social status became fuel for her determination. While her classmates partied on weekends, she worked part-time at a local tech startup, learning coding and business operations. While they shopped at expensive boutiques, she took free online courses in finance and management. Her mother had taught her that education and hard work were the great equalizers, and Sarah intended to prove her right. Years passed, and Sarah's dedication began to pay off. She graduated as valedictorian, earning a full scholarship to Princeton University. Alex's taunts followed her to graduation day, where he made sure to remind everyone that her mother couldn't afford a new dress for the ceremony. Sarah simply smiled, knowing that in a few months she would be studying at an Ivy League school while Alex rode his father's coattails to a middling university. College was a revelation. For the first time, Sarah found herself surrounded by people who valued intellect over inheritance, innovation over social status. She thrived in the competitive atmosphere, double majoring in computer science and business administration. Her internships at prestigious tech companies turned into job offers, and her unique perspective on economic inequality inspired her to develop new financial technology solutions for underserved communities. By 28, Sarah had founded her own successful fintech startup, Secure Life Solutions, which specialized in creating accessible financial services for working-class families. The company's innovative approach to microloaning and financial education caught the attention of major investors, and within 3 years, Secure Life had offices in 5 major cities. Sarah's mother no longer worked 3 jobs. Instead, she served as the inspiration for Secure Life's community outreach program, helping other struggling families access the resources they needed to build better lives. The worn backpack from high school sat framed in Sarah's office, a reminder of where she came from and why she fought so hard to succeed. One morning, as Sarah reviewed applications for a new executive position at Secure Life, a familiar name caught her eye. There, in pristine formatting on expensive resume paper, was Alexander Wellington III. His application detailed his experience working for his father's investment firm, along with several failed attempts to start his own companies. The market downturn had hit the Wellington family hard, and rumors circulated about questionable investment decisions that had cost them dearly. Sarah leaned back in her chair, memories of high school flooding back. The expensive sweaters, the casual cruelty, the way he had made her feel so small. Now, here he was, applying to work for her. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of irony. She could have rejected his application immediately. Part of her wanted to scribble, "Found this resume in a dumpster," across it in red ink. But Sarah had learned long ago that success was the best revenge, and true power lay not in humiliation, but in rising above it. She scheduled the interview for a Friday afternoon, knowing that Alex wouldn't recognize her name. She had never changed it, but people saw what they expected to see, and the Alexander Wellingtons of the world had never expected Sarah Chen to amount to anything worth remembering. The days leading up to the interview passed in a blur of anticipation. Sarah threw herself into her work, reviewing quarterly reports and meeting with investors, all while wondering how time and circumstance had managed to bring her former tormentor to her door. When Alex Wellington walked into Secure Life's gleaming headquarters, he was a shadow of his former self. His designer suit, while still expensive, was slightly worn at the cuffs. His confident stride had been replaced by the cautious gait of a man who had learned about failure the hard way. He checked in with reception, his hands fidgeting with his leather portfolio, a nervous habit he'd developed after his 3rd failed venture. The waiting area of Secure Life Solutions was everything his father's old money office wasn't. Instead of dark wood and oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors, the walls featured inspirational stories of people who had pulled themselves out of poverty through financial education and microloans. Alex found himself staring at a photo of a woman who reminded him of someone. A cleaning lady, perhaps, or one of the cafeteria workers from his prep school days. "Mr. Wellington?" A polite assistant appeared. "Ms. Chen will see you now." Alex followed the assistant through the open-concept office space, noticing how the employees seemed genuinely engaged in their work. There was an energy here that had been lacking at Wellington Investments, before it all fell apart anyway. He pushed away thoughts of his father's face when they had lost their biggest clients, of his mother's tears when they'd had to sell the summer house. The corner office surprised him. He'd expected something ostentatious, given the company's success, but the space was mindfully designed with simple, elegant furniture. A frame backpack hung on one wall, odd decor for a CEO's office. And the desk was clear, except for a laptop and a small family photo he couldn't quite make out. "Hello, Alexander," a familiar voice said from behind him. "Please, have a seat." Alex turned, and for a moment, his brain refused to process what he was seeing. The woman before him was dressed in a crisp charcoal suit that probably cost more than his current monthly salary. Her long black hair swept into a professional updo. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold, the same eyes that had once brimmed with tears in Crimson Academy's courtyard. "Sarah?" he managed, his voice barely a whisper. "Sarah Chen?" "The same," she replied, walking past him to take her seat behind the desk. "Though you used to call me Salvation Army Sarah, if I remember correctly. Please, sit down. We have an interview to conduct." Alex sank into the chair, his mind racing. He'd rehearsed this interview countless times, prepared answers about his experience, his vision, his skills, but none of those practiced responses seemed adequate now. The last time he'd seen Sarah Chen was at graduation, where he'd made some stupid joke about her mother's dress. He'd forgotten about it immediately, the way he'd forgotten all his casual cruelties. But sitting here now, he had a feeling Sarah remembered every single one. "Your resume is impressive," Sarah said, scanning the document with professional detachment. "Though I noticed quite a few short-lived ventures, 3 failed startups in 5 years. That must have been difficult." The sympathy in her voice seemed genuine, which somehow made it worse. Alex cleared his throat. "The market was volatile, and I made some mistakes." "Mistakes are excellent teachers," Sarah replied. "Tell me about what you learned from them." As Alex began to speak, he realized with growing discomfort that every answer he gave seemed to echo back to their high school days. When he talked about learning humility after his first business failure, he remembered mocking Sarah's secondhand clothes. When he described discovering the importance of building genuine relationships with clients, he thought of how he'd once convinced the entire lunch table to move when she sat down nearby. Sarah listened attentively, taking notes and asking pointed questions about his experience with financial technology and his understanding of Secure Life's mission to serve underserved communities. Her professionalism was unimpeachable, but there was something in her eyes, not triumph or satisfaction, but something more complex. "One last question," she said, setting down her pen. "Our company culture is built on empathy and understanding. Can you tell me about a time when you demonstrated those qualities, particularly towards someone from a different socioeconomic background than yourself?" The silence that followed was deafening. Alex opened his mouth, then closed it again. In his mind, he saw countless moments when he'd done exactly the opposite. Alex began, then stopped. The practiced smoothness of his interview persona cracked. "I haven't always been good at that. In fact, I've been terrible at it." Sarah raised an eyebrow, but remained silent, letting the weight of the moment settle between them. "Look," Alex continued, his words tumbling out, "I know you have no reason to even consider me for this position. The way I treated you in high school, it was cruel, inexcusable. I was a privileged brat who thought money made me better than everyone else." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that reminded Sarah of their teenage years, though the confident smirk was long gone. "The irony is, losing everything taught me what you probably knew all along. Money doesn't define worth." Sarah leaned forward slightly. "And what exactly did you learn when you lost everything, Mr. Wellington?" "That I had no idea how to actually work for something, that I'd never built anything real." His voice grew quieter. "That I'd spent so much time looking down on people, I never noticed they were usually climbing higher than me." Through the glass walls of her office, Sarah could see her employees bustling about their day. Many of them came from backgrounds similar to hers: scholarship kids, children of immigrants, people who had pulled themselves up through sheer determination. She'd made a point of creating opportunities for those who reminded her of her younger self. "Did you know," she said, turning back to Alex, "that when I started Secure Life, 3 different venture capital firms turned me down? They loved my idea, but they suggested I might want to find a more polished CEO to be the face of the company." She smiled slightly. "One of them specifically recommended someone from a better background. Someone more like you, actually." Alex winced. "What did you do?" "I remembered something my mother used to say when I would come home crying about the bullying. She'd tell me that people who try to make you feel small are usually afraid of how big you can become." Sarah stood up and walked to the frame backpack. "This was my high school bag. I keep it here to remind me that everything I've built came from understanding what it's like to struggle, to be overlooked, to be underestimated." She turned back to face him. "Our clients aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet, Mr. Wellington. They're people working multiple jobs to keep their children in good school districts. They're single parents skipping meals to pay for their kids' school supplies. Their families one medical emergency away from financial ruin. When you looked at me in high school, that's all you saw. Someone poor, someone beneath you. What do you see when you look at our potential clients?" Alex was quiet for a long moment, studying the photos on the wall of Secure Life's success stories. "I see people who deserve better than what I used to be," he finally said. "People who deserve someone who understands their struggles, not someone who," he gestured to himself, "not someone who used to mock those struggles." Sarah walked back to her desk and picked up his resume again. "You know, your technical qualifications are actually quite good. Your experience with traditional banking systems could be valuable, even if your own ventures weren't successful. But I have to ask, Why secure life? With your family connections, damaged as they may be, you could probably find a position at a more traditional firm. Alex straightened in his chair. For the first time since recognizing Sarah, he met her eyes directly. Because I'm tired of being part of the problem. When I saw what Secure Life was doing, creating accessible financial tools, providing education, actually helping people build better lives, I realized this was a chance to be part of the solution. Even if it means working for someone I once... He trailed off. Once bullied? Sarah supplied. Once treated as beneath you? Yes, he admitted quietly. The irony isn't lost on me. Sarah tapped her pen thoughtfully against her desk. The morning sun streamed through the windows, catching the frame of her old backpack and making the worn fabric glow. In that moment, she thought about her mother's other favorite saying, that true strength lies not in having the power to hurt others, but in having the power to help them change. Tell me about your worst business failure, Sarah said suddenly, changing the direction of the conversation. Not the surface-level version from your resume. Tell me what it really felt like to fail. Alex's shoulders tensed, but he nodded. It was my second startup attempt, a luxury concierge service. I thought I could leverage my old social connections, serve the demographic I grew up with. He gave a bitter laugh. I burned through my trust fund trying to make it work. Spent money on marketing to people who'd stopped returning my calls after my father's company tanked. One night, I couldn't sleep, so I went to the office at 3 a.m., found my last employee clearing out her desk. What did she say to you? Sarah asked, noticing how his hands clenched at the memory. She said I was so busy trying to impress people who didn't care about me that I had completely missed what our company could have been. We had this amazing scheduling software we developed, but I was too focused on selling overpriced services to my old country club friends. She told me we could have adapted it for small businesses, maybe helped people who really needed better tools to manage their time. He shook his head. She was right, but by then, I'd wasted all our resources. Sarah nodded slowly. And what would you do differently now? Listen, he replied immediately. Listen to people who know what it's like to build something from nothing. Stop assuming I know better just because I grew up with money. He gestured around her office. Look at what you've built here. You're helping exactly the kind of people I ignored. And you're succeeding because you understand their needs, because you lived it. Sarah stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline. The Secure Life building wasn't the tallest, but it had the best view of the sunrise. She'd chosen this location specifically because it faced east, a reminder that each day brought new opportunities for change. The position you're applying for, she said, still facing the window, would put you in charge of our new community outreach division. You'd be working directly with people who have every reason to distrust someone with your background. Many of them have stories very similar to mine. How would you handle that? Alex was quiet for so long that Sarah turned back to look at him. He was staring at the frame backpack again, his expression troubled. I'd tell them the truth, he finally said. That I used to be part of the problem, and that's exactly why I want to be part of the solution. That losing everything taught me what real value is. He met her gaze. And I'd tell them that the CEO of this company once had every reason to throw my resume in the trash, but she instead taught me something about second chances. Sarah felt a familiar tug in her chest, the same feeling she'd had years ago when she first dreamed up Secure Life, when she realized she could build something that would help families like hers. She walked back to her desk and pressed the intercom button. Lisa, could you bring in the community outreach program documentation? And please ask HR to prepare a standard offer package. She released the button and looked at Alex, whose expression had shifted from resignation to disbelief. This isn't charity, Mr. Wellington, she said firmly. And it's not forgiveness either. That's not mine to give. The people you hurt in high school aren't all sitting in corner offices now. Many of them are still struggling against the very systems that gave you your privileges. She sat down and opened a folder on her laptop. This is a chance to help change those systems. You'll start at entry-level salary, no matter what you made before. You'll need to complete our full training program, including spending time working directly with clients. And you'll be reporting to Mrs. Garcia. You might remember her daughter Maria from high school. She was the one you called the scholarship charity case when she tried out for the cheerleading team. Alex finished, his face flushing with shame. Maria Garcia. She quit the tryouts after I convinced the captain she'd bring down the squad's reputation. Mrs. Garcia has been with us since the beginning, Sarah continued. She helped design our community outreach programs. She's also one of our toughest managers, and she has no patience for pretense or prejudice. Are you prepared to work under her leadership? Alex straightened his tie, a nervous habit that hadn't changed since high school. Yes, absolutely yes. I owe her an apology too. You'll owe a lot of people apologies, Mr. Wellington, but more importantly, you'll owe them results. This isn't about making you feel better about your past. It's about creating real change in people's lives. Sarah pulled up a document on her computer and turned the screen so Alex could see it. It showed a map of their service area, with red dots indicating families who had been denied traditional banking services. Each of these dots represents a family like mine was. Single parents working multiple jobs, students wearing secondhand clothes so they can afford textbooks, people who are one emergency away from disaster. She zoomed in on a particular neighborhood. Your first project will be here. It's a community where the average household income is below the poverty line. Many of them are immigrants, like my mother was. They need financial education, accessible banking tools, and most importantly, respect. Alex leaned forward, studying the map. These areas, they're not far from where my family's bank used to reject loan applications. Exactly. Sarah's voice was steady. Your father's lending policies affected real people, Mr. Wellington. People who had dreams, ambitions, and the willingness to work harder than anyone at your country club ever had to. Now you have a chance to help change that story. She handed him a thick folder. This is your onboarding package. Take it home. Read every page. Think carefully about whether you're ready for this kind of work. It's not glamorous. You won't be making deals on golf courses or dining at five-star restaurants. You'll be sitting in people's homes, listening to their stories, and working to earn their trust. Alex took the folder with slightly trembling hands. When would you want me to start? Sarah checked her calendar. Next Monday, 7 a.m. sharp. And Alex? She waited until he met her eyes. Leave the designer suits at home. Where you're going, they won't help you connect with anyone. As Alex stood to leave, clutching the folder like a lifeline, Sarah remembered one more thing. Oh, and you'll be sharing an office with Kevin Torres for the first few months. Remember him? Alex's face went pale. Kevin Torres had been another frequent target of his high school cruelty. A brilliant math student whose family ran a small grocery store. Alex had made sure everyone knew about the times he'd seen Kevin helping his parents stock shelves after school. Kevin is our head of financial analytics now, Sarah continued. He designed most of the algorithms we use to assess loan applications. I'm sure you two will have plenty to talk about. The weight of everything, the job offer, the responsibilities, the daily reminders of his past behavior, seemed to hit Alex all at once. He gripped the back of his chair for support. I deserve this, Alex said quietly, more to himself than to Sarah. All of it. This isn't about what you deserve, Sarah replied, standing up. It's about what our clients deserve. Follow me. I want to show you something before you make your final decision. She led Alex through the office to a large conference room where the walls were covered with photographs. Each one showed a family standing in front of a small business, a new home, or a college campus. Below each photo was a handwritten story. These are our success stories, Sarah explained, watching Alex's eyes scan the walls. That woman there, she started a catering business with one of our microloans. Now she employs 15 people and provides free meals to a local shelter every week. The man next to her picture used our financial planning tools to save enough to send his daughters to college, the first in their family to go. And that family? She pointed to a photo of a mother and son standing proudly in front of a small bookstore. That's Maria Garcia's family. Alex stepped closer to the photo. Mrs. Garcia stood beaming next to her son, who held up a store key like a trophy. After high school, Maria got a full scholarship to study business administration, Sarah continued. She came to work for us right after graduation, and her first-hand experience with financial hardship made her exceptional at her job. Her mother used our programs to expand their family bookstore from a tiny shop to 3 locations. They now host free literacy programs for neighborhood kids. She watched as Alex moved from photo to photo, his expression growing more serious with each story he read. These are the people you'll be working with, Alex. Not just their files or applications, but their dreams, their struggles, their determination to build better lives. I remember, Alex's voice cracked slightly. I remember making fun of Maria for working at that bookstore after school. Said she'd probably end up selling books her whole life, just like her mom. And now she's going to be your supervisor, Sarah said firmly. Which brings me to something important. This job offer comes with conditions, non-negotiable ones. She led him to another room, smaller and more private. The walls here were different. Instead of success stories, they displayed graphs, charts, and maps. This is our strategy room. We use it to track our impact and plan our initiatives. Sit down. Alex took a seat at the long table while Sarah pulled up a presentation on the large screen. The first slide showed a series of statistics about financial discrimination and systemic barriers to economic mobility. Your first 3 months will be probationary, she began. During this time, you'll undergo intensive training in financial inclusion, cultural competency, and ethical lending practices. You'll spend 2 weeks working in our call center, taking calls from clients facing financial emergencies. You'll shadow our field agents as they visit homes and businesses. She clicked to the next slide, which showed a detailed training schedule. Every Friday, you'll attend mandatory sensitivity training sessions led by Mrs. Garcia. You'll learn about the real impact of predatory lending, housing discrimination, and the banking practices your father's company championed. I'll also require you to volunteer at least 10 hours each month at local community centers, the same ones where my mother used to clean after hours to make extra money. You'll help people fill out loan applications, teach basic financial literacy classes, and most importantly, listen to their stories. Alex nodded, taking notes frantically in his portfolio. Sarah continued, her voice growing more intense. Your performance will be evaluated not just on traditional metrics, but on feedback from the communities you serve. We'll conduct anonymous surveys asking clients if they felt respected, understood, and supported. One complaint about classist or discriminatory behavior, one hint of the old Alexander Wellington III attitude, and you're out. No second chances. She clicked through more slides, outlining additional requirements, weekly progress reports, community feedback sessions, cultural competency assessments. You'll also need to complete an extensive research project examining the historical impact of discriminatory banking practices on minority communities. I want you to understand exactly how institutions like your father's bank contributed to the cycles of poverty we're trying to break. Looking at Alex's overwhelmed expression, Sarah felt a momentary twinge of sympathy. She remembered her own early days of building secure life, how daunting each new challenge had seemed. But she also remembered the sting of his words in high school, the way his casual cruelty had made her question her own worth. There's more, she said, pulling out another folder. Every member of our community outreach team is required to mentor at least 2 high school students from underprivileged backgrounds. You'll help them with college applications, financial aid forms, and scholarship essays. In fact, she paused, allowing herself a small smile. Your first mentee will be Jessica Martinez. Alex's confused expression quickly transformed into one of horror as recognition dawned. Jessica Martinez? Isn't she? The daughter of our building's maintenance supervisor, Sarah confirmed. And if I remember correctly, you had quite a lot to say about her father's profession during our senior year career day presentation. The memory hung heavy in the air between them. Alex had publicly mocked Jessica's proud description of her father's work, suggesting she should aim higher than pushing a broom like Daddy. Mr. Martinez has worked here since we opened, Sarah continued. He's put both his daughters through college with the help of our employee education program. Jessica is a straight-A student with dreams of becoming a civil rights attorney. She'll be applying to colleges next year, and she needs a mentor who understands both the world she comes from and the one she's trying to enter. She closed the presentation and turned to face Alex directly. So, Mr. Wellington, knowing all of this, the strict conditions, the intensive training, the mandatory community service, the constant supervision, and the fact that you'll be working under and alongside people you once looked down on, do you still want this job? The silence that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity. Alex took a deep breath, his hands steadying on the table. Yes, he said firmly. Yes, I want this job. Not because I need it, though I do, but because for the first time in my life, I have a chance to do something meaningful, something real. Sarah studied him carefully. The polished veneer he'd walked in with had cracked completely, revealing something raw and genuine underneath. "Tell me why," she pressed, "and don't tell me what you think I want to hear." "Because I'm tired," Alex replied, his voice heavy with emotion. "Tired of being the person I was. Tired of carrying around the weight of every cruel thing I ever said or did. When my family lost everything, I thought that was rock bottom. But sitting here, seeing all of this," he gestured to the photos on the walls, "I realize I haven't even begun to understand what real struggle looks like." He stood up and walked to one of the success story photos, a young woman standing in front of a small tailoring shop. "This woman, I remember her daughter from school. Lucy, right? She used to mend clothes for other students to make extra money. I once told everyone she was running a charity thrift store out of her locker." "Lucy's mother took one of our first microloans," Sarah said quietly. "She turned her home alterations business into a successful boutique that specializes in affordable formal wear for students. Every year, she provides free prom dresses to girls who can't afford them." Alex touched the photo frame gently. "All these people, they didn't just survive people like me. They built something beautiful despite us. I want to be part of that. Not to make myself feel better, but because maybe, just maybe, I can help prevent another rich, entitled kid from causing the kind of damage I did." Sarah walked over to her desk and pressed the intercom again. "Lisa, please ask Mrs. Garcia to join us." She turned back to Alex. "If you're serious about this, you should hear what your new supervisor has to say." A few minutes later, Elena Garcia entered the room. She was a petite woman with steel gray hair and eyes that seemed to look straight through Alex's expensive suit to the nervous teenager he'd once been. "Mr. Wellington," she said coolly, "Sarah tells me you're interested in joining our team." Alex stood straighter, fighting the urge to fidget under her gaze. "Yes, Mrs. Garcia. I know I have a lot to prove, especially to you and your family." Elena walked around him slowly, like a general inspecting a questionable recruit. "You know, my Maria cried for weeks after those cheerleading tryouts, not because she cared about being a cheerleader, but because you made her feel like she didn't belong in that school at all." "I'm sorry," Alex said quietly. "I know it doesn't change anything, but I truly am sorry." "You're right, it doesn't change anything," Elena agreed. "But what you do next might. Sarah says you're willing to start at the bottom, learn from the ground up. Are you prepared for how hard that will be? To have your work judged by people you once judged? To sit in humble homes and listen to stories that will make you uncomfortable? To face the consequences of the system you benefited from?" Before Alex could answer, she continued, "Because, let me be clear, I won't make this easy for you. You'll work harder than you've ever worked. You'll face justified suspicion and resentment. Some clients won't want to work with you once they learn your name. Are you ready for that?" The old Alex would have bristled at being spoken to this way. The old Alex would have fallen back on his family name, his privileges, his sense of superiority. But that Alex had died a slow death over years of failure and self-reflection. "I'm ready," he said, "and I expect it to be hard. I deserve every bit of suspicion I'll face. But I'm not asking for trust. I'm asking for a chance to earn it." Elena shared a look with Sarah, some unspoken communication passing between them. Then she turned back to Alex. "Very well. Monday morning, 6:30 a.m., not 7 NOS. You'll meet me at the community center on Marshall Street. Wear something practical. You'll be helping set up for a financial literacy workshop, and those folding chairs won't move themselves." As Elena left the room, Sarah gathered her papers. "Take the weekend to think it over, Alex. Read through every document in that folder. Monday morning will be your point of no return. Once you start this journey, there's no going back to who you were." Alex clutched the folder to his chest, years of memories and regrets weighing heavily on his shoulders. As he turned to leave, he caught his reflection in the window. The expensive suit, the carefully styled hair, all the trappings of his old life. By Monday, everything would change. Monday morning arrived with a gray drizzle that soaked through Alex's new Target-bought button-down shirt. He'd spent Sunday shopping for practical clothes, an experience that had humbled him further when he realized he'd never set foot in a discount store before. The cashier had to explain how their rewards program worked. At 6:15 a.m., he pulled his used Honda Civic, another recent downgrade from his BMW, into the community center parking lot. Elena Garcia was already there, supervising a group of volunteers unloading boxes from a van. "You're early," she noted, handing him a stack of workbooks. "Good. Those need to go to the main conference room, then come back for the chairs. We're expecting 60 people today." For the next hour, Alex worked harder physically than he had in his entire life. He carried chairs, arranged tables, sorted through financial education materials, and helped set up a coffee station with generic brand supplies that reminded him of how he used to mock the coffee in the school cafeteria. As people began arriving for the workshop, Alex noticed something that made his chest tight. Many of them wore clothes he recognized, not designer labels, but the same brands Sarah used to wear in high school, the same brands he'd ridiculed mercilessly. "Mr. Wellington," Elena called, "come meet Lucy Chen." Alex turned to find himself face to face with a young woman in a beautifully tailored but simple dress. She looked exactly like her mother had at their high school graduation, except her eyes held a confidence that came from success earned through hard work. "Lucy runs our youth financial literacy program," Elena explained. "You'll be assisting her today." Lucy's smile was professional but cool. "I remember you, Alex. You used to call me the discount seamstress." She handed him a stack of worksheets. "Today, you'll be helping me teach teenagers about building credit responsibly. Think you can handle that?" As the room filled with young faces, many bearing the same worried expressions he remembered seeing on Sarah's face years ago, Alex felt the full weight of his transformation beginning. These kids weren't so different from the ones he'd tormented. They had the same dreams, the same potential, the same right to respect and opportunity. The workshop progressed, and Alex found himself drawn into conversations with students who reminded him painfully of his past. There was a girl wearing scuffed shoes who wanted to start her own tech company, a boy in a handed-down jacket who dreamed of becoming a doctor. With each story, each shared hope, the walls of his privileged perspective crumbled further. During the lunch break, Elena appeared at his side. "First test," she said quietly. "Table 4, the girl in the purple sweater." Alex looked over to see a teenager sitting alone, shoulders hunched, trying to make her simple packed lunch look less conspicuous among the other students who had money to buy from the vending machines. "Her name is Maya," Elena continued. "She's been skipping lunch to save money for college application fees. Sound familiar?" It did. Sarah had done the same thing in high school, though he'd spread rumors that she had an eating disorder. The memory made him sick now. Without hesitation, Alex walked to the vending machines. 5 minutes later, he placed a sandwich, chips, and a drink on Maya's table. "The workshop includes lunch," he said simply, remembering how Sarah had hated any display of charity. "Everyone gets the same." Maya's grateful smile hit him like a physical force. As he walked away, he heard her excitedly telling her friend she could buy new pencils with the lunch money she'd saved. That evening, as Alex helped stack chairs and clean up, his designer watch, a relic from his old life, caught on one of the folding mechanisms and shattered. He stared at the broken face for a moment, then quietly slipped it into his pocket. He wouldn't be needing it anymore. Sarah appeared in the doorway, having come to check on the workshop's success. She watched as Alex gathered scattered worksheets, wiped down tables, and helped an elderly participant find her forgotten umbrella. He moved differently now, with less entitled swagger and more purposeful humility. "Mrs. Garcia tells me you did well today," Sarah said as Alex approached with the attendance sheets. "But this was just day 1. Tomorrow you'll be doing home visits with Kevin. Ready for that?" Alex thought about facing Kevin Torres, about walking into the homes of families still struggling against the very system his father had championed. "No," he admitted, "but I'm going to do it anyway." Sarah nodded, recognizing in his voice the same determination she'd felt all those years ago when she'd decided to build Secure Life. "One more thing," she said, holding out a small box. "Standard issue for all our field workers." Inside was a simple chrome watch with the Secure Life logo. Nothing fancy, purely functional. Alex put it on immediately, the weight of it feeling more significant than any luxury timepiece he'd ever owned. As they walked to their cars, Sarah paused. "Alex," she said, her voice carrying years of history, "do you remember what you told me the day before graduation? When I won that scholarship to Princeton?" Alex's face fell, the memory hitting him like a physical blow. I said you'd probably end up cleaning the Princeton bathrooms instead of studying in them." He stared at the ground, shame coloring his features. I said someone like you would never make it in the Ivy League. Sarah nodded slowly. You know what kept me going during my hardest days at Princeton? Every time I felt overwhelmed or out of place, I'd remember those words. I'd picture your smirking face, and I'd study harder. When I launched Secure Life, I used that memory to fuel me through countless rejections from investors who thought like you used to. She gestured at the community center behind them, where the last few workshop participants were leaving with renewed hope in their eyes. Now look at us. Look at how far we've both come, in opposite directions. You rose, Alex said quietly. I fell. No, Sarah corrected him. I built something meaningful. You lost something meaningless. There's a difference. She checked her watch, the same model she'd just given him. The real question is, what will you build now? Over the next year, Alex threw himself into his work with a dedication that surprised even his harshest critics. He worked weekends at the community center, spent evenings helping students with college applications, and took every training opportunity available. His first performance review from Mrs. Garcia, though tough, acknowledged his genuine effort to change. Kevin Torres, after initial frostiness, became a mentor of sorts, teaching Alex the intricacies of ethical lending practices. Together, they developed a new program specifically designed to help former privileged kids understand and combat systemic financial inequality. Maya, the girl from the workshop, got accepted to 3 colleges with full scholarships. When she stopped by the office to thank them, she brought a homemade bracelet for Alex. Her mother taught jewelry making. He wore it every day, even with his business suits. On the anniversary of his first day, Sarah called Alex into her office. The frame backpack still hung on the wall, but it had been joined by other symbols of transformation, including a broken luxury watch in a small case. I have a proposal for you, she said, sliding a folder across her desk. We're launching a new initiative called Breaking Barriers. It's a program designed to help privileged young people understand and address systemic inequality. Given your unique perspective and the progress you've made this past year, I'd like you to lead it. Alex opened the folder with trembling hands. The program outline was comprehensive. Workshops at private schools, mentoring programs pairing wealthy students with peers from different backgrounds, financial literacy courses focused on ethical wealth management. Why me? He asked, though he already knew the answer. Sarah smiled, the same determined smile that had carried her from a worn backpack to a corner office. Because you're living proof that people can change, that privilege can be transformed into purpose, that the bullies of yesterday don't have to be the bullies of tomorrow. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city where thousands of stories like theirs were still unfolding. Besides, she added, who better to dismantle a broken system than someone who once benefited from it? Alex joined her at the window, both of them watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of possibility. He thought about all the Alexander Wellingtons still out there, all the Sarah Chens still fighting to rise, all the barriers still waiting to be broken. I accept, he said simply. Sarah nodded, knowing that sometimes the greatest revenge isn't making someone fall, it's helping them become better than they ever thought they could be. And somewhere in that same city, a teenage girl opened her locker to find a new backpack, anonymously gifted through the Breaking Barriers program. Inside was a note that read, "Your worth isn't determined by what you can afford, but by what you choose to become. Dream big, work hard, rise high." It was signed simply, from someone who learned that lesson the hard way. The cycle had been broken. A new story had begun.